as the Supreme Court rules in favour of the BJP government's abrogation of Article 370, stating that the law was a temporary provision granted to Kashmir due to war situation, and removing it in 2019 was constitutionally valid. We dwell back into the history to decode the whereabouts of Article 370 and the Supreme Court's verdict. The Supreme Court stated that the state had no internal sovereignty once the accession with India was complete, but the autonomy was promised in the instrument of accession and enshrined in the Article 370 of the Indian Constitution. As per the Indian polity, the President can declare that Article 370 ceases to operate, but this can be done only on the recommendation of the Constituent Assembly of the state. However, when BJP government abrogated Article 370 on August 5, 2019, it substituted the term Constituent Assembly with Legislative Assembly of the state, at a time when J&K was under Governor's rule and did not have a Legislative Assembly. In numerous petitions, advocates argued the same, asserting that Article 370 ceases to be temporary provision after the 1954 order of the J&K's Constituent Assembly, and as per the prior rulings by the Supreme Court. For instance, Advocate Sibal argued the need of concurrence with the Constituent Assembly of the J&K for its abrogation. However, during the hearing, judges repeatedly questioned the term temporary, proposing interpreting Constituent Assembly to include the Legislative Assembly. The Chief Justice also suggested using Parliament's amending powers for 370's abrogation, and the possibility of creating a new category, distinct from the basic structure, was also raised by the judges. On this matter, Advocate Gopal Subramaniam cited the 1954 order, asserting that the Constituent Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir ratified Article 370's autonomy, recognized by the Indian government, arguing that the Constituent Assembly and Legislative Assembly of the state were distinct institutions under the Indian Constitution. Senior advocate Zafar Shah contended that Article 370 was rooted in the instrument of accession and the 1948 proclamation establishing a unique constitutional framework for J&K. He also questioned the rationale behind restricting Parliament's power in 1952, when Jammu and Kashmir had already acceded to India. However, the government argued that J&K wasn't unique among other princely states, and 370 created a psychological duality among the people, citing internal disturbances and external aggression in the region. Now, looking at all the elements, the top court of the country still upheld the government's decision, stating that 370 was an interim arrangement due to war conditions in the erstwhile state, and that J&K had no internal sovereignty. It ruled that 370 was a temporary provision. The top court also noted that BJP government had stated that the statehood of the J&K will be restored and the status of the Union Territory was temporary. Considering the submission, the court finds it unnecessary to determine whether reorganization of J&K into Union Territory is valid. The bifurcation of Ladakh as a Union Territory was also upheld by the court, stating that Article 3 allows a portion of a state to be made a UT, and directed the Election Commission of India to hold assembly elections in J&K by September 30, 2024. But what actually happened in the history? Why was Article 370 written temporary, and what did the word temporary mean? To understand the layers of the history, we need to go back to 1947. When Maharaja Hari Singh signed the Instrument of Accession with India, legally, India's jurisdiction only extended to defense, communication, and external affairs. It was anticipated that the accession would be confirmed by the will of the people through a plebiscite under the auspices of UN. However, in the years to come, the Government of India sought to integrate it within the framework of India, which later became Article 370. 2 months after India-Pakistan partition, now the accession was also signed, Hari Singh wanted assurance that he would retain authority within the state. However, Nehru wanted him to quit and hand over power to Sheikh Abdullah. It was difficult for Hari Singh to work with Abdullah, who had fought against him for 20 years, as there was already a political uprising in Kashmir against the Dogra rule. Nehru believed during the war with Pakistan over Kashmir that Sheikh Abdullah's full involvement was mandatory. However, Sheikh Abdullah and Hari Singh contested over the distribution of government departments and the appointment of Muslims to more senior positions. On 2nd March 1948, Mahajan resigned as the Prime Minister and Sheikh Abdullah was installed on his place. Historians write that the restrictive nature of Hari Singh's accession to India meant that the total integration with India could not take place without a new agreement. Until such time, Kashmir would retain such special status. Sheikh Abdullah was as insistent as Hari Singh that New Delhi had no right to grant its jurisdiction in Kashmir beyond the three areas: defense, communication, and foreign affairs. In pursuance of this commitment, a special status was proposed in the article of the Indian Constitution. The article was moved by Gopalaswamy Iyengar in the Indian Constituent Assembly on October 1949, proposing a special status for Kashmir because of its special circumstances. After India and Pakistan's reluctance over demilitarization amid the failure of the UN resolution, the plebiscite couldn't be held. It became difficult for either the state to integrate with India or for India to integrate with the state unilaterally into its union. Sheikh Abdullah initially believed in India's secularism and democracy, and in July 1952, he signed the Delhi Agreement with Nehru, and Article 370 was accepted. As part of the autonomy, India allowed Kashmir to retain its own constitution, separate flag, criminal court, and denied property rights to outsiders. Kashmir had its own prime minister and president. By 1953, Nehru and Abdullah had grown apart, and later New Delhi jailed its prime minister, Sheikh Abdullah. The UN continued to visit Kashmir until 1962 for the plebiscite, but both countries were unwilling to demilitarize the region. As a result, Article 370 was accepted as an alternative to the plebiscite.